Over 20 years after Final Fantasy VII changed gaming forever, its remake finally arrived, but it was missing something and someone special. Square Enix refused to wait and produced a little slice of what is to come by presenting a piece of DLC featuring everyone's favorite materia-stealing ninja. And this Final Fantasy fanatic was excited to see what antics Yuffie Kisaragi could create in Final Fantasy VII Remake, episode Intermission. Like its 8th generation predecessor, though thanks to this being a PlayStation 5 exclusive, gamers looking to play the DLC have to upgrade to the Intergrade version, either free for those who have already purchased the game on disc or digitally, or purchase the Intergrade edition itself. Episode Intermission features quite a few things to sink one's teeth into beyond the main, barely 4-hour long story. There are a few mini-games and side quests that range from collecting posters for a bar to smashing boxes under a strict time limit. Chadley's VR Battle Arena returns to give players the chance to fight the summon Rama to add his materia to Yuffie's inventory. The most profound optional time consumer is the reimagined Fort Condor minigame, where players use purchased and earned avatars in hopes of conquering an opponent's outpost placed across a battlefield. There's also the return of hard mode that unlocks after finishing the story, adding several battles in the VR section and presenting tougher battle stipulations, a difficulty I've yet to conquer after completing the story, and obtaining a majority of the trophies in a little over 8 hours. Taking control of Yuffie following the events of Remake, specifically the bombing of Mako Reactor 5, players are allowed to try out the ninja's rather outlandish, yet incredibly fun combat style that utilizes blistering strikes and throwing her patented shuriken. Yuffie tossing her weapon of choice can cause continuous damage to whatever enemy it sticks to for a short period of time, allowing the protagonist to execute non-elemental attacks from afar before calling her weapon back for hack-and-slash strikes. Midway through the story's first of only 2 chapters, Sonon is introduced, another Wutai ninja like Yuffie who works for an Avalanche side group intending to steal the ultimate materia from Shinra Corporation. Using a staff, Sonon actually works more as a close-range fighter that can be commanded to execute his skills and magic attacks thanks to the weapons and materia attached to his equipment. Unlike Remake, players can't switch between Yuffie and Sonon, as the latter controls more like Red 13, as the computer handles a majority of everything he does, with the player getting the chance to order aforementioned skill attacks and magic usage. A majority of the combat implementations seen in Remake return here, including the active time battle bars that fill up when Yuffie and Sonon land successful attacks. The most profound combat addition is synergy. Through the tapping of the L2 button, Yuffie and Sonon will team up to perform simultaneous regular attacks, and if their ATB bars are filled up enough, land devastating double-team versions of their regular skill maneuvers. But there is a limiter to synergy attacks, as the ATB bars fill up around 3 times slower than when Yuffie and Sonon are doing their own thing, meaning using synergy attacks is usually best for when enemies are near death or staggered or stunned via the returning stagger system. Materia combinations are still incredibly effective, such as slotting fire materia alongside an HP absorb orb inside Yuffie's shuriken to ensure every time the magic lands, it restores a bit of her health. Also returning from Remake is the weapon upgrade system and how summons operate. There aren't as many enemy variations in Intermission, but the boss battles are presented incredibly well outside of arguably the final fight. Due to the action-oriented nature of Remake and now Intermission, the dynamics of boss battles are greatly changed, mostly for the better, including the new Gigantopede boss forcing the player to be attentive of the action on foot and in the air. As mentioned earlier, there is more to Intermission than its story and the combat system. Side quests aren't numerous, but enjoyable, such as a collectible mission that sees the player potentially facing some tough adversaries with Yuffie alone if the player takes up said mission during the first chapter. And then there's Fort Condor, On a tabletop battlefield, two competitors choose sets featuring avatars representing one of three colors that have strengths and weaknesses in correlation to other colors. Green is strong against blue, red is weak to blue, and red is strong against green. With its own ATB bar, players will choose the upcoming avatar on the list assigned to dispatch them onto the battlefield. Depending on what the opponent chooses as a defensive measure could mean the difference between advancing into the enemy's territory and potentially winning by destroying the enemy's outpost, or taking a defensive measure to protect the player's outpost. Though there can be some cheap moments, Fort Condor is one of the most enjoyable Final Fantasy minigames of all time. Though Yuffie is the star of this intermission, the fact is there are several new characters introduced and some returning characters as well. The aforementioned Sonon is given enough backstory through cutscenes to explain why he's so determined to take on Shinra. Scarlet gets more screen time than expected and revels in every scene she's a part of, especially when confronting Yuffie. There are cameos and scenes from the main cast of Remake, including the expansion of Remake's ending. But it's not all positive from a character perspective, as Yuffie's first on-screen allies are just bodies needed for exposition and a Fort Condor tutorial. And the revelation of two new adversaries near the game's end feels underwhelming at best. Technically, Remake Intergrade and Intermission are impressive from both visual and audio perspectives. Like so many other Square Enix games, Intermission looks gorgeous. The soundtrack stays true to what came before it in Remake, with some standout additions including the Happy Turtle themes. Frame rates and overall stability are remarkable. Intermission doesn't reinvent the wheel and tries to add to what worked so well in Remake. There are some glaring issues from its predecessor that make their way into this piece of DLC, while presenting one of the franchise's most entertaining characters in better fashion than ever. Intermission understandably doesn't try to outdo what was presented over a year ago, just adding a little bit of exposition to a character that will, most likely, become pivotal to the narrative whenever Remake Part 2 arrives. For those who want to re-enter the world of Midgar without replaying Remake, this is an entertaining additional piece to the first of who knows how many entries making up the Remake saga, though not something that feels like it needs to be played immediately. The problems that hindered certain aspects of Remake's combat still remain, and the lacking character development in regards to every protagonist but Yuffie and Sonon definitely leaves something to be desired. Also, gamers need to know that the basic upgrade to or purchase of Intergrade doesn't provide Intermission, with the DLC needing to be bought separately. This DLC is a worthy purchase for Final Fantasy VII Remake fans, and those who understand that even kids can conquer the biggest foes.
Gotcha! Flyer acquired.